Welcome to Content Heroes, everyone.
Yay!
Special 1-year anniversary episode. So excited about this. We are doing something we haven't done before on here, and that is I have spent the last year interviewing all of these influential business leaders, and now my friend Niduk is going to turn the tables and is going to interview me. And so I'm not really sure how this is going to go. I've never done this before. We're just gonna roll with it. Take imperfect action, as we like to talk about, and just see what happens.
Awesome! I'm so excited, Josiah. This is really exciting to be the one on this side of the mic for a change. So
welcome to Content Heroes. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for allowing me the mic. So this is really exciting for me to be here and to be talking to you and having the chance to ask you some questions. We're gonna go deep, guys. We're definitely going to get behind the content hero sort of what do we call the facade, the mystery of the man. We're going to start peeling back the layers. So first of all, congratulations, Josiah. Content Heroes 1-year anniversary. Oh my gosh, what an amazing journey you have been on. And happy birthday. Holy smokes, what a party you had yesterday. And your kids. Oh my goodness. Tell me more. They seem like they had such an amazing time.
Yeah, that was so much fun. They absolutely loved it. I didn't give my wife much of a heads up, which was pretty funny. I was like, hey, so I'm doing this live and I want you guys to be a part of it, like 10 minutes before we're supposed to be doing this thing. And she's like, okay, I should probably put pants on the kids.
Oh my gosh. That's probably the last thing you would need is to all of a sudden get flagged and censored on social media. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I wanted to do, I launched Content Heroes podcast last year, the day after my birthday. And I don't even really remember what my thought process was behind that, except it just sounded like a fun way to sort of keep the momentum, the excitement going. And I tend to do, when I do something, I like go all in and do a lot of things at once for whatever reason.
Love it.
Yeah. So but it's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, because now every year we sort of celebrate both things at once.
Amazing.
And I didn't anticipate, a few weeks ago, I didn't anticipate doing lives every day. So I didn't know that this is what was going to happen, but I thought, hey, why don't we just have a little birthday party celebration for the, with the community, and doing it live, and bring my kids on because they're adorable.
You had the hat, you had balloons, you had that thing.
The thing that didn't make noise.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. The kids had a blast.
Oh my God.
They loved speaking to the microphone, and like we watched the video afterwards, and it was really funny because they were then interacting with us through the video and trying to talk into the mic to the video. Yeah, it was pretty fantastic.
I loved it. That was so special. And so happy birthday.
Thank you.
Congratulations, 1 year. What a transformation has been. You and I have known each other for a while now, a couple of years, and it's been an amazing journey to watch you step into the role that you have, the man behind the mic. Right? It's been amazing to see that, and I feel very privileged to not just be here owning the mic today, but to be able to ask you questions, but also to be a small part of your journey as well. And so thank you for that. It's an absolute privilege to work with you. So I wanted to sort of start at the beginning, and I'm gonna sort of just ask a question.
Okay.
Guys, nobody, like, he does not know what I'm asking. He doesn't really know where I'm going with this.
I'm a little scared of where we're gonna go, but I'm on board. I'm an open book. Let's do this.
So if we rewind back to last year, let's say in the summer, did
Okay.
you think you would be here where you are today?
No, not at all.
Where did you think you would be? What did you think you would be doing?
Man, I don't know. That's kind of what I was trying to figure out. So this would have been summer of 2019. There was a lot of angst in there for me because I had, I'd left my job a couple years prior to start an agency, and I was in this point where I saw good growth at the beginning, but it was not. My heart wasn't in it. It wasn't truly aligned. But I hadn't really. I don't know if it wasn't that I hadn't figured it out that it wasn't aligned, or I hadn't admitted to myself that I wasn't aligned. So there was a lot of just trying to figure out, just a lot of like there was not very much clarity, a lot of just trying to figure out where I was and what I was supposed to be doing and where I'm headed, and so there was no, hey, this is the plan for next year, this is exactly what I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to be at this point by then. It was a lot of asking a lot of questions to really try to suss out what it is that was important to me, and what I was aligned with, and how I could show up and serve in the world. And it took me a little while to figure that out.
So then the question is, where did the word podcast enter your vocabulary of I'm going to do this?
Yeah, that's a great.
So, so we're now, so it's almost the end of October, right? So this last year, end of October, all of a sudden you decided to launch a podcast, but the summer, like a couple of months before, no podcast, no idea of starting a podcast. So where did that all come from? Like, what was the driver?
So I'm trying to think back to the point, because so much has happened since then. Podcasting was something that I was always interested in, and because I loved consuming podcasts. That's just sort of my jam, right?
Love it.
Like I love in-depth conversation, and it's funny, up before I started the podcast, that question where people ask you, like, what if you didn't have to worry about money, what would you do for the rest of your life? That sort of thing, and I could never answer that question.
That's except like the best question ever.
Right. I could never really answer that question, except for, like, take aside, like, traveling the world with my family or something like that. But like, the only thing I could think of was like, man, I would love to just sit down and have really amazing conversations with really interesting people, and like drink bourbon at the same time. Like, but that's not a job, right? Yeah. That's not a job. And so I was always interested in it, but it never really sank in for me that it was something that I could do, that I was capable of, until it was funny. I bought a course on how to start a podcast like a year before I actually started. I sat on it for a year. I didn't do anything with it because I was interested in it, but I was like, I wasn't committed to it, and I didn't really know had all these stories. Like, I don't know what it would be. I would do a podcast about. I don't know, who would be on my show, who would listen to my show. Yeah. There's just a lot of those stories that kept me from actually taking any action.
Right.
And so I remember very, very clearly, it was the end of September.
Okay.
And I had this. Okay, this is like getting.
I feel like you're gonna share some deep dark secret right now. No, is that what's going on?
No, it's just I haven't really gone like in this depth before. Because so I'm gonna lay it all out here.
Lay it out.
this sounded a little bit woo for what where I've typically gone, but I was listening to one of our coaches talk about asking for things in dream time. Like some of the most famous songs that were written came to people like in their dream time, and it's just this idea of kind of at its most sort of pragmatic, basic level is this idea of asking a question before you go to sleep, and then sort of letting your subconscious mind work on that while you're sleeping, and then the idea is like you wake up in the morning, you have the answer. Yeah. So I thought I'll try it.
Not always.
Right. So I'll try it, and so I did that. I asked something like what should I be doing to build an audience or grow a business, or something kind of vague like that.
Yeah.
And I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning, and there was nothing. There was no answer. I'm like, okay, well that didn't work. And I was doing I was doing daily meditation and stuff. So I did my morning meditation, and it was like as soon as I came out of that, it was like download into my brain instantly. You're going to start a podcast. It's going to be called Content Heroes. Here's how you're going to serve. Like I had just like, I didn't have all the details, but I had enough to where like I had the sort of vision and the direction.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment where I realized I had to make a decision. I could either take that and do what I'd done in the past, which is, not really commit and just sort of sit on it for a while. Or I could say in this moment, I'm going to be 100% committed. I'm going to start heading in the direction that I've been given. And I'm gonna follow through on it, and that's what I decided to do. And it was amazing the difference that made for me, because I went from that morning,
right,
having that
intuitive download has settled in.
This download that came in. I went from that moment to within a week, I'd had the artwork done. I'd scheduled my first interview for the show, and then within 3.5 weeks, I think I was launching with 3 episodes and then 30 reviews on Apple Podcasts. What? And it was all just because I made that commitment. That I closed that. You've heard me talk about that gap between 99% committed and 100% committed, and I closed that gap, and I said, this is what I'm doing, and I'm heading this direction no matter what. And it all fell into place.
You're giving me goosebumps. I love that because, so many times, people get some of these intuitive downloads, right? Like they see it, they hear it, they feel it, but then they sometimes stop and they start questioning themselves with who am I to do this? Right? Like, and all of a sudden that layer of imposter syndrome starts to come up, right? And it's amazing when you find that you can actually listen to those intuitive downloads, bringing in the woo, right? To sort of help bridge that. So did you ever ask yourself that question? Who am I to? Ever?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's especially before I had started this entrepreneurial journey like over 3 years ago. That was a thing that was always holding me back. But over the course of the last few years, I've definitely done a lot of inner work to start to dissolve those stories. But there's and so I have a lot more tools now at my disposal to work through those things. But there's always, one of the things I've become obsessed with over the last few years is just like how your brain works and how your mind works. And it's the reason why I was interested in this idea of like asking for things in dream time is like I feel like that your intuition, which lives in like your unconscious mind, that to me is your true self.
Yes.
And those things that come through, like that's where you're aligned with those. Yeah. But then your analytical brain comes in and its job is to like forecast things and try to keep you safe. And from an evolutionary standpoint, it comes from like
No,
literally
don't do
keeping you
that.
safe, right? like don't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, right? But now, like in the world we live
Or
in,
run over by a woolly mammoth? Is that
right.
what?
But now the world that we live in is, we're generally fairly safe, but our brains are still in this like overactive, like, now it's don't get rejected by the crowds, because you'll be left out on your own to fend for yourself, and then you'll die. Like those, like it's very basic, like lizard brain level. Like that's what it's telling us. But that what we're interpreting though is that all of these reasons why we can't do things.
Yeah.
And our brains are, this part of our brain is very, very like good at coming up with excuses and coming up with what seem like legitimate reasons why you shouldn't listen to that inner knowing, that intuition. And so there's, I don't know if that ever completely goes away. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten to the point where it completely goes away. But I will say that like the voice now it's almost more like a whisper that's easily dismissed, because when I started to have that, I came back to, the tools that I had learned over the last few years. And the first one is like, that's, the idea of who am I, like that's just an interpretation, right? And so that doesn't really mean anything. Like what's an interpretation that serves me better?
Yeah.
And then the other thing was really focusing on, what is the outcome that I want? And like for my life, for the people that I'm serving, for my family, for my business, like what is it I'm actually trying to achieve? And what's possible for me if I stop listening to the voice that's telling me I can't do something and listen to the voice that's telling me to do the thing that I know deep down is what I'm aligned with.
Yeah.
And when I step into that, then the question becomes like, how can I serve and make an impact? Like what would be possible, and like how many people could I help if I really stepped into like my fullest self and really showing up in the world?
So I have a question here, because, ultimately at the back end of this, we're talking about business, right? And in the book, fabulous book, by the way, one of the things that, you mentioned very briefly is that, because you've been talking about a toolkit now, but you also talk about like this amazing support system. So, how has it been for you, when these doubts and these questions come up for you? How does that fit in when you think about, like, do you turn to your family and go, to your wife and the kids and look at them and go, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And they're like, no, you can do it. I mean, okay, I can totally see your kids, by the way, cheerleading behind you. So how does that like come into play?
Yeah, and my wife and my kids are definitely cheerleaders for me.
Oh my God.
Absolutely, and I love them so much for that. There's a difference though, like I know they're always going to be on my side, but there is a difference between those voices, which are important and necessary, but then the other voices of people who understand your business and who are in the same space as you, to have that support as well. And so you hit on something key here, which is like, I talked about having tools. One of the primary tools is that community, is having accountability, is having alternate perspectives and lenses through which to view things, so that you can take a step back from what you're doing and get a broader, higher perspective. Yeah. And that's required for really, becoming more objective and detaching yourself from your ego and from your identity, the things that you attach yourself to that hold you back. Yeah. It's incredibly important. Like you can't move to the next stage on your own. That's one thing that I've learned, is that you can't do the same things that got you to where you are if you want to get to move past that. And one of those things is like, it's in order to figure out the new ways to do things, the new ways to be, you have to be part of something that where you're learning from and growing with other people who are either where you are and figuring it out together, or maybe a step ahead of you, so that you can see, like, that is absolutely vital. No one does this. I know it's easy to sit and watch some, amazing content creators who have, like, millions of followers and have built this massive, 7 or 8 figure business. It's easy to look at them and say, oh, they're self-made, they did it, but none of them did it on their own.
Yeah.
And the ones who, like, because I've talked to a lot of them, right? I know this.
And
they'll tell you
spent a whole year talking
right. And they will tell you straight up, like, you can't do this all on your own. Yeah. You have to be part of something that's bigger than yourself. Right? Yeah. And having a team,
Before we go there, though.
Okay.
I want to talk, because you said something really interesting. You said something about, just getting out there and recording the podcast and doing it, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about that, because here's something that I absolutely love about you, Josiah, and it's been amazing working with you, because you're definitely not afraid to do this, and you're not afraid to take imperfect action. Right? Like, you're and that to me, and
which is not always the case.
Yeah, but this is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and the reason why it's beautiful is because, so on the live yesterday when you were taking us through the book, right? You took us through a book that looked very different to the one that I downloaded.
Yep.
And a lot of people would have been like, oh my gosh, no, gotta cancel, can't do this because the book isn't ready, right? Like the finished copy isn't ready. The nicely designed version isn't ready. So I want, because it was fantastic, because, you highlighted in the book examples of where people were not afraid to do that. They weren't afraid to just get out there, test and try, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the podcast a year ago, I'm not even sure it has, but maybe it has. Has it changed? Like, has the way you've kind of evolved the podcast over the 12 months, like, has it changed at all? Like, or maybe in the back end? Outside of like the business side, right?
The back end's definitely changed.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, mostly there's, I think I've talked about this in some of my lives. Like, my initial focus was I want to build that muscle of consistency and production and making sure that I'm showing up week after week after week, not just for my audience and building that trust, but also for myself. Yeah. So there was a lot of focus for me in the beginning around how do I put a team and systems and processes in place, mm-hmm. so that I'm freeing up my own energy to like my creative energy. The thing that is the special sauce is like my uniqueness. So what are the things that are unique with me, my unique contributions to the podcast and to the business that no one else can do, and just focus on those so that the rest of it is not draining that energy from me.
For you to be the visionary, right?
Yeah, exactly. So to be the leader of the business. And so there's this shift in thinking that has to happen. And but it starts with, to me, it starts with this idea of taking imperfect action, like we talk about, because when you're taking imperfect action, well, another way to say that is you're giving yourself freedom to fail.
Yeah.
And when you're in this mode where, one of my favorite people in the world is Nathan Elson. I interviewed him on episode 45, I believe.
Oh my God, good
memory. And he was my boss early in my career, and he taught me a lot of this stuff. And one of the things that we talked about in this episode is the idea of output versus outcomes. Right. And when you're attached to your output, and that's your focus, you're not giving yourself the like failure is it's hard to make that sort of part of the equation. But if you're focused on the outcomes, if you're focused on like what you're trying to achieve, and you're owning that, part of that process of letting go of the output is letting go of this idea of perfectionism, because when you have a craft, like you're really dedicated to honing that craft and perfecting that craft and polishing that stuff. But if you're in a business where you need to move fast and you need to test things and you need to see what actually resonates, like you're like at least half the stuff you try is not going to work. And if you don't know unless you try, and you don't know unless you try, exactly. And so you're caught in this. If you're not willing to take imperfect action and fail, quote unquote, like you're caught in this in this like stalemate. Like you can't do anything because you're never going to get it out the door if you try to perfect it. And if you don't do that, you're not going to learn to improve upon it over time.
So here's a question for you. Okay, so when you get to that point where all of a sudden you're like, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm onto something, right? And I know, you and I have kind of talked about this before, but when the light switch goes off and you're like, oh my God, I really am onto something here. Does it scare you a little bit? Like, do you go, oh my God, this could be really successful? And then all of a sudden you sort of choke up and you're like, does it?
Yeah, I would say yes. With the caveat of like, there's such like little distinction between like fear and excitement, like nervousness and excitement,
So true.
like,
yeah, so true.
and a lot of times when we're excited about things, we think that that we interpret it as fear. Because that's how our mechanisms in our body, our systems have the same reaction between like excitement and fear, right? And so our brains can interpret it either way. And so that's a powerful thing that I've learned too, is like taking that initial reaction and reframing it of like, instead of focusing on, oh my God, what would happen if this, if this became successful or if it didn't, all these things, like framing it to
ego, right?
Yeah, but reframing it to what would be possible if this is, and so there's always going to be that 3D ego sort of sense of trying to keep us safe and keep us small. And so where I come from is like, that voice, I try to be grateful for it, for what it's done for me in the past, but at the same time, recognizing that it's now holding me back and it's not going to get me to where I want to go. And so I can move through it, but there's definitely.
And are you moving through it by being consistent? Is that principally how you just sort of, you stay on the line, you stay focused, you don't, you and I spend a lot of time talking about strategy, right?
Yeah.
And I know that, for me, that's a really big piece. For those of you listening, if you do end up listening to an upcoming episode, you'll hear me talk a lot about strategy. But, because I know in the early days when you started the podcast, it wasn't tied to a strategy, right? So, but is that because, so for you, as you were sort of walking through it, was it sort of just, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to show up. And as you said, build that muscle memory, record those podcasts, do those interviews, and just see what happens.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you ask, I just want to make sure is like, the difference between, kind of going back to the question you asked a little while ago about the difference between how I started and where I am now. I would say there was a strategy in the beginning, but it was very vague and loose. It was, I would say, it's more of a direction. And to answer your question about,
that's where a lot of people start.
Right. And to answer your question about how to move through that fear, how I do that is I say, okay, what is the very, like the minimal amount of effort, very first step I can take in that direction. And I identify that, and then I just take it without thinking. Because I know, just through my own experience,
without thinking.
That's exactly.
I'm just gonna jump. I'm not gonna look where I'm going.
Right.
I'm just gonna jump. Okay.
It's how I quit. That's how I quit my job. Over 3 years ago. It was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I know I can't do this anymore. So I'm doing something before I talk myself out of it. And that's the thing. It's like, I know that and here's why. Because and going back to that conversation with Nathan, we talk about this a lot. Is there's this idea of of it's so much easier to course correct.
Right.
Like if you have momentum, like if you think about a ship, like you can't steer a ship anywhere if there's no momentum.
Yeah.
But once you've got momentum, then you can start to course correct to really narrow down where you're going. So what I do is like I get a general direction, like, you know, with the podcast, it was like I start a podcast, here's what it's going to be called, here's the basic idea behind it. Okay, start moving forward. And then as I was building the muscle of consistency, it's not just about consistency for the sake of consistency. It's about what are you learning with each repetition. Mm-hmm. And so each repetition also is a learning. And that's the idea behind the freedom to fail, is like, it's not just failure for the sake of failure. Like another way to look at it is there is no such thing as failure. There are only outcomes and interpretations. Yeah. And so looking at, you know, and if your outcome is, I want to learn so that the next time it'll be better, then it's always a success. Because if you can take the action, put something out there that isn't perfect, but at least is heading in the right direction, and then you make sure that you learn from it so that the next thing you put out is a little bit better than the thing before, then you're always making progress. And that's what I've tried to focus on.
So what do you think has been, in the last 12 months, the single biggest lesson you've learned in putting out a podcast?
Ooh.
You can choose one.
I can only choose one. Oh,
you only choose one. Let's see.
The single biggest lesson I've learned with the podcast. Man, I would probably say that I would probably say that it's oh man, this is really hard. What?
Guys, I did not prep him with questions very clearly.
That's why
it's about getting behind the scenes, Josiah. I want to know, like, you know, this is if I
okay, yeah.
Like,
okay, yeah, okay. So this is why there are 5 themes in the book and not just one. Yeah, so I'm thinking through this, like, because there's a lot of stuff that I have learned. I think probably the thing that is probably the most important out of those, that for long-term success, mm-hmm. is going back to a little bit what we talked about earlier, of that mental shift of going from output to outcome. Because in that is the difference between just a content creator and a business leader. Yeah. That is probably the most significant thing that I've learned, because if you're just doing this because you love it, and like just because you love it, and it's just sort of your thing on the side, and it's your hobby, great, that's fine. Like do that. Like if that's all you ever wanted to be, that's fantastic. I had a bigger vision, or a different vision for this, of I want it to be a lot bigger than myself. And the only way I can do that is if I'm leading a team, and is if I bring in a support system, and it's if I take it seriously as a business, mm-hmm. because a business is what's going to give me the mechanisms that keep it going in the long run, right? Yeah. So it's the mental shift of like going from just a content creator to a business leader, but it's also in that shift, what comes along with this was just like the overarching principle in the book is creating content that then fuels your business. Yeah. And that's a big disconnect that I've seen in talking with different content creators. They're out there and they're doing it, and they're putting a lot of stuff out, and they're creating a lot of output, but because they're not focused on the outcomes, and they're really attached to the output, they're not making that connection between the content and then that content fueling the actual business growth.
Mm-hmm. And so when you think about where that light switch went off over the last 12 months, at what point in the last 12 months did it really start to set in for you? Was it when you came into the book that all of a sudden you're like, or was it before that?
There were a couple of light bulb moments for me, because in those like the first 6 months or so of the podcast, when I was really focused on building that muscle of consistency, I still had in the back of my mind, like, how do I turn this into more than just a podcast? Like, how do I create a business? How do I use it to help people make a bigger impact than just a podcast can? And so that was always kind of in the back, but I hadn't quite figured it out yet. And it was really when I started testing some different ideas for products, and one of them had a really good response, and people paid me money
I remember that
to learn from me, right? This was my,
oh my God.
yeah, this was like my podcasting workshop that I sold back in the spring. It realizing that, I have something that's valuable to people, and I can actually help people and a specific person in a specific way. And so then that's what, so there's a couple of things from that. Like, that was a big lesson that I learned of, like, there is something here. And all of the work I've been doing over the last 6 months was not in vain. That I have been building up a body of work. I've been like serving. I've been creating something of value, putting it out into the world. And now, because of that, I've built up enough trust that people are willing to invest in something that I create that they know will help them. So that was one piece of it. But the other piece was, because the way that I did it, it was very much taking an imperfect action. It was like not this polished course. It was like, hey, show up and I'm going to show you how to do this thing that I do. But if I hadn't done that in that way, and I wasn't testing things, I wouldn't have learned something very, very key, which was that my marketing of that was not directed at who my real audience was.
Your real audience, or the audience you were hoping to be talking to?
Well, kind of both, right? So like,
okay.
I thought, because I thought like the audience that I had in my mind, or I guess maybe it was more about the product market fit, right? So this idea of like the product and the way I was positioning it wasn't actually aligned with who my audience is. And so we've had in-depth discussions about this, because you've helped me sort of really like gain clarity from it. But it was that realization of, okay, I see now where the disconnect has been between my content and my marketing and my sales and the actual offer and the audience. Like, that was the next real big light bulb for me of like, I see where the disconnect has been. So now I know how to correct that. And now I know how to really start creating content in a way that is journeying people towards what it is that I have to offer, and is prepping them for that and really helping them along the way.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about building a business, and you've got a book, you've got a podcast. Where does the business come in? Where you've got a course, you said, a program or a workshop. Where else is the money coming from?
So
what's happening, Josiah?
I don't know. Am I allowed to talk about this yet? Like, what?
I don't know. Surely, we're talking about building a business. Give us a bit of a sneak peek. Like, what's going on in behind the scenes? We're going in a little bit behind the snes here. So
yeah. So I'll say that the very specific thing that I learned was I put together this workshop thinking, I've been interacting with these content. I've been building up an audience of content creators and business leaders, and I'm going to put together this. I'm going to show them my production process, because I'm really proud of my production process for the podcast. It's really well refined, and it really is effortless.
Yeah.
And
guys,
so
hold on. I just want to interrupt for a second. So back in March or April, Josiah, I was a part of a group where Josiah shared us his process. And I remember I think going through this training that he did with my mouth literally on my desk going, this is amazing. Like, he's taking me for literally an A to Z, or Z, as you guys say in the US, the A to Z of how you go through your entire process. It was phenomenal. So anyway, yes, I digress, but I do have to just.
No, I appreciate that, and I also appreciate, like, you were one of the first ones to really encourage me to like turn it into something that's like a paid offering, because I even at that point, this was early in the spring. I didn't yet recognize my own value in a lot of this stuff, and that was another big aha. It's just this, the exchange of money for something that I put out wasn't really about the money. It was about the validation of like, oh, I have something valuable. I can do something valuable.
I love that.
And so
everyone has something of value, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing that I learned from doing this workshop was that most of the people who purchased a ticket bought it to send their VA or their integrator or someone from their team.
Oh, interesting.
So I was selling something I was selling a product for an integrator to my audience, which are visionaries, like, and leaders. And that's where the disconnect was. They still bought it because they saw the value in it, and they knew that they made that connection in their head of like, oh, I could send my team. But the difference was where the aha moment came in, was like, oh, I'm positioning this wrong. And so how can I put together something that is for the visionary, that is that also includes some of these tools? And that really is what my differentiator is. So the big, like, I've talked about this a little bit, I think, but like I haven't really given much detail on it.
Okay. So we don't have to go into that much detail, but this sounds really it does sound really exciting, because I'm guessing what's coming down the road for you is something where you're able to connect with more deeply with this visionary, the role that you said you stepped into, right? With the and understanding how you would use content to fuel
exactly
a business, right?
Yes,
so,
you've seen my page that I put together for which is so it's called the Fuel Mastermind, and it's helping business leaders connect their content in a way that fuels their business growth and positions them as a leader in their niche.
Amazing. I'm so excited for that to come out.
I am too. It's going to be happening soon.
Okay, so then here's going to be my concluding sort of question as we begin to sort of wrap it up. So you've now very clearly, the Josiah from 12 months ago to even 18 months ago is a very different Josiah, right? And as I said, it's been such a privilege to see your journey, to be a part of your journey, and to see the business leader that you have become, and that you're owning, and just, oh my gosh, the book, right? The book really in so many ways solidifies so many things, because I think people often don't spend enough time also reflecting back on the knowledge, right? And as a podcaster, where you are interviewing and you have the opportunity to connect with these amazing business leaders, in their individual niches that are using, whatever content channel they're using to drive their own businesses, all of a sudden, if you don't take the time like you did to step back and look and revisit and unpack and go a little bit deeper into those lessons, it helps to reaffirm things. It helps you also to go back and rethink about something someone said 6 months ago that you may have forgotten because you've now skipped ahead because we live in that world, right? And so I love the book that, you've put together. The journey is very much your journey, which is fascinating that was also, one of the underlying themes of the last 12 months. And, is that part of your divine download? Who knows? Perhaps, right? But here's my concluding question for you, Josiah. At the start of this chat, I asked you, who were you, 12 months to 18 months ago? The question now is, who do you think, or where do you think you will be in 12 to 18 months from now? What do you imagine Josiah, Content Heroes, the Fuel Mastermind, what do you think will happen? And I know this is, we can't predict the future. There are no glass balls. But if there were.
Yeah, I love this question. And, because I'm kind of going back to what we've been talking about, I'm not necessarily the type of person who has like, here is my 40-step plan for the next 5 years. Like, that is not me at all. I'm very much of I have a general vision, kind of general direction, and I am like taking it, one step at a time and kind of working my way there. Where I see myself heading, and I don't know if this is going to take 12 months or 5 years. I have no idea, but where I see myself heading is I'm moving towards building a 7-figure business, and where I'm focusing right now is building out different revenue vehicles.
Yeah.
So that I'm not reliant on any one individual, but I have, like a good investor gets a diverse portfolio. I'm starting with 1 or 2 and building that up, and then I'll be adding more to that. But the direction for me as a whole, as I'm heading towards 7 figures of whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
For Content Heroes itself, where I will say, you'd asked me like if anything changed, or from the beginning of Content Heroes to where we are now. One thing that was part of my vision from the beginning that has not changed is just really started to take form, and especially in these last couple of months, is that I always envisioned Content Heroes to be a community. So it was never just supposed to be content. It's never just supposed to be a podcast. Because what I enjoy is that those conversations and that building that community.
Yeah.
So that was always a piece of it. And so now, where I'm focusing on, or my focus in the next, for the next however many months, is really leaning into investing in that community, growing that community, building that, having different sort of levels of that for people to invest in at wherever they are in their part of the journey. So that it's not just about me having conversations one-on-one with influential business leaders and then sharing that, but it's me facilitating people to help grow each other, because I'm nobody's savior. I'm nobody's guru. I'm nobody's like, I'm just a normal person who has practiced certain things over the last year that's really put me into a place where I've started building out this community. But I want it to be about us all growing together and achieving the things that the lives that we want and making an impact in the world.
Oh, what a beautiful way to end. Oh my gosh. Can't top that. Amazing. Thank you so much, Josiah, for allowing me to take control of the podcast today, and the interview. It's been an absolute pleasure to dig in a little bit deeper and to share this with the world. So I'm so looking forward to what comes next. And I hope everyone who's listening does as well. I can tell you there's some juicy things coming up. So can't wait.
Thank you so much, Niduk. This was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed. This is one of those things too, where I was a little nervous. I don't really know how this is going to go, but you know what? Let's just do it and see what happens. And so I really enjoyed this conversation, and I just wanted to say thank you to the conversations that you and I have had behind the scenes for you to help me get clarity, and also I want to thank this is the 1 year anniversary, like today, and we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the people out there listening who have followed along and trusted me enough to, at a minimum, subscribe and let me let me show up in your ears for like 30 minutes every week. And so I want to thank each and every one of you who's part of the audience, part of the community, for the support and for engaging. And we've had some amazing conversations and engagement in the Facebook community, especially in the last month or two. And it's been amazing to see. Like that really lights me up. Like that provides me with the fuel, the momentum from a personal level to like keep going, because I know that, if this is happening, then I'm at least on the right track. Yeah. And so let's just keep moving and keep pushing forward. So thank you to everyone out there. Thank you to Niduk for coming on and sharing this time with me. And to everyone out there listening, until next time, go be a hero.